Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are doing a full-length review of A Red Rose Chain by Seanan McGuire, the 9th book in the October Daye series. So, the October Daye series is about our main character, October Daye, and she is half fae and half human and a knight, and she tends to take on very odd problems around her fae kingdom because she's best suited to solve them. In this particular book, a neighboring kingdom, Silences, has declared war on Toby's kingdom, and Toby is being sent off to be the diplomat who tries to avert war. And the only problem is Toby is not a diplomat, and the story goes from there. So if you have not seen any of my October Daye reviews, this is a reread. This entire series is a reread, and as such, I do break up my reviews into 3 sections. The first section is a non-spoilery review of just this book to kind of give you an idea of like if it's good or not. And then number 2 is the section that contains spoilers, but just for this book or previous books in the series. And then the third section is a discussion that will spoil the rest of this series. And I do this so that you can go ahead and click away from the review whenever feels right to you. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So let's talk real quick about the world building. So the world building in the October Daye series is overall just excellent. And this book is a really great example of why I say that. We get a lot of background information about this new kingdom. We get a lot of history about the relationship between Silences and Toby's kingdom of the Mists. We get just a ton of information about how this kingdom is run and all this kind of stuff. And we know that it's background information, we know it's world building information, and it's just very nicely laid into the story, so it doesn't ever feel like info dumping or anything like that, and it just creates this beautiful picture. Seanan McGuire has a real strength when it comes to world building and integrating that world building into the story, and it shines in this book. Let's talk a little bit about characters and character development. We have hit the point in this series where the cast of characters is so large that we can no longer focus on all of them. We are no longer seeing all of them. And so each book we are just kind of choosing a handful and we really focus on those. And in this book, it is the people that end up making up Toby's diplomatic entourage. Now, even within that small group of 5 people, we are primarily focused on one individual who has been an ally of Toby's for a while. However, we haven't gotten a lot of background information on them, and now we get a lot of their background information, and it is very, very interesting and very well done. And in this, we actually do see some development from Toby. So 2 books ago, Toby did something with her magic that fundamentally changed another person, and it was done without their consent because it was a life or death kind of situation. But now Toby really has to grapple with this, and what does this mean for who she is, and like, should she regret it? Does she regret it? Like, how can she make sure that this doesn't turn into a pattern of doing this without people's consent? And it's very interesting to see that introspection because we don't frequently get to see it. A lot of introspection from the characters does happen off page between books, and then we just kind of see their conclusions within the book. So this is fairly unusual that we do get to see the introspection, and it is just really good, and I really did enjoy it. And honestly, it's not overwhelming. Like sometimes you do get the introspection and that's like all they can think about, and you're like, okay, I get it. You're having issues. But in this, it came up at times you would expect, and we got her thoughts and feelings, and then she kind of moved on, and it just felt much more realistic, and so I did appreciate that. Talk about the writing style and pacing. Good. It's good. We've gotten to the point in the series where it's just solid. Seanan McGuire has found her groove, and it really shines. The pacing was not too fast, not too slow, so that was great. The writing style itself is very easy to understand, and I find it very engaging. So lastly, let's talk about the plot. So the thing about this plot is that personally, I do not enjoy these kinds of storylines where Toby is put into a situation where she doesn't know what she's doing. It just makes me so sad to see one of my favorite characters flailing around and honestly just failing miserably. And not because of circumstances, but because she just doesn't know how to do these things. Toby doesn't know how to be a diplomat. She doesn't know how to maneuver herself politically. And so, of course, she was always going to fail. And I just don't really like reading that such kind of a book where there's no way for her to really succeed in this role. So I did that. Again, that's a personal preference, and that's okay if you disagree. But for me personally, I did not like it. And then the other part is there were some plot points in this particular book that felt silly or unnecessary or not well thought out. And I'm not sure if we're going to get more information about it later in the series, but we have not yet. And so I, as an independent kind of book or like the latest book in the series, I thought it weakened the plot itself. And so I didn't really appreciate it. And overall, I ended up, because I didn't like those two parts about the plot itself, I ended up dropping my rating down to a 4.25 out of 5 stars. So still a very solid book, still a very enjoyable book, but I did have a few quibbles with it. Now there's a few things that I do need to say. In this last little bit, and the first is that we have also hit the point in the series where this is not a standalone. If you try to read this as a standalone, it is not going to be very enjoyable for you because there's just so much that you're going to be missing. Number 2, a good thing is that we do have another, we have a coming out story in this particular book. There is now more queer representation of a different variety than we have had before, and I think it's a very nicely handled storyline, and I really appreciated it being in there. And lastly, the last thing that I need to say is that Toby is going to Silences to be the diplomat, and so she sees how that kingdom is run, and how it is run is horrible, and it is very bigoted in a way that a lot of us would recognize. It is very similar to how white people have historically treated Black people in the United States. Now, it's pretty gross to read. I really struggled with this, but I also kind of want to mention it, especially if you are reading this book around the time that I am filming it, because I am filming it in the middle of the George Floyd protests. And so this may not be something that you can handle at this particular point in time. Now, Toby does not condone this behavior or these bigoted thoughts, and she actively works against this system. However, it is still there. And for some of us, always, but also more of us right now, that may not be something that we can handle reading at this particular point. So I did just want to kind of give that warning as well. But overall, I do think that this is a very good book. It is a good addition to an excellent series. And that is it for my non-spoilery section. So we are going to jump into the section where I do talk about stuff that is spoilery related to this book. And if you do not want to hear that, go ahead and click away now. Bye. Okay, as always, I will continue. I will just talk about things in the order that I wrote them down in my notes. And let's start with Walter and his coming out. And it was beautiful. I really did appreciate it. But more than anything, so I like that we finally got a trans character. I do think it was overdue, especially if we talk about how the Fae feel about gender and sexuality. Like, it kind of seems silly that we haven't had somebody transgender before now. But I actually also really appreciate how Toby reacted to him coming out as trans. Like, she basically said, "I'm sorry you felt like you couldn't tell me." And I like that because honestly, it's an acknowledgement on her part that part of her job is to create a safe space where people who are different from her can be themselves. But part of creating that safe space is being vocal about it and making sure that like not just doing the things that need to be done, but making sure that people know that it is a safe space. And by Toby saying, I'm sorry you felt like you couldn't tell me, she's acknowledging that she failed somewhere along that, in that job that she had, and that she's sorry for that. And so I do think that that's a really nice way to approach that conversation. Just, I failed you and I'm sorry for that. We did, oh my gosh, you guys, we had the return of the Unnamed Queen. I didn't remember that she comes back, so this was a little bit of a surprise. This book, I remember a lot of the big events, but I did not remember a lot of the details. So the queen, Unnamed Queen coming back was like, oh. Also, like, the Unnamed Queen is just perfection in being an antagonist, and coupled up with Reese, and I hate them. I, on bridge level, hate them. I have strong feelings when I had very strong feelings towards them when I read this book that were very difficult to deal with. But they are very, very good as antagonists. Speaking of the queen, I did feel some amount of sympathy for her at the end as she was trying so hard to regain her siren heritage that Toby had pulled out of her. Toby fundamentally changed who the queen is, and she can never go back. And her realization that she can never go back to having siren being a part of her makeup was just sad. It was so sad. And I did have some amount of sympathy, even as I fully recognize that it was her fault that this happened. Or she took actions that led to this. So like, she is at fault as well. Let's see. Everybody's reaction to Toby being named diplomat was hilarious. Like, I actually, like, everybody except the Lushak was just like, but does Arden have literally anybody else to send? And the answer ends up, of course, being no. Arden really doesn't have anybody else to send. Plus, Toby does have the added benefit of being great at antagonizing Reese and the Unnamed Queen. And sometimes you want your diplomats to antagonize the other party, so maybe we can short circuit this war because they do something stupid. But in any case, like, no, there really wasn't anybody else to send, and everybody but the Lushak just trying to grapple with that is just phenomenal. But I do love that the Lushak doesn't even blink. She's just like, of course you're the diplomat. Okay, let me give you the information you need, and then I'm getting off the phone because I don't actually want to talk to you right now. I love that reaction from the Lushak, and I just think it's so on point. And that's it, you guys. Anything, there were a couple other things I do want to talk about, but they are definitely more for spoiling the rest of the series. So if you want to stick around, you should go ahead. But if you do not want to be spoiled for the rest of the series, you should go ahead and click away now. Bye. Okay, so I figure that we should probably start with some of these plot holes, these plot points that I had problems with, because I don't know if they ever get resolved. Some of them I think might get resolved sooner rather than later, and I just don't remember. But I just kind of wanted to address it because it irritates me so much. But like, okay, we got to see another Court of Cats, and that was so interesting. And we spent almost no time there. Like, it felt like just a setup so that we could come back there and have less, like, introduction and foundational work the next time we're there, which I'm just like, ugh, okay, fine. But really? Okay. I really just kind of wanted more. And so I ended up slightly disappointed that we didn't get to see more of John and the Court of Cats. And of course, obviously now we set up that Toby is going to be offering the Changeling's Choice to John's children, which is a thing, and we'll end up having to get back to it. But again, I'm just like, I wanted more, and I was just disappointed that it wasn't there. Spike going to the silences it just felt so unnecessary, because Spike made such a big deal about going with the entourage to the silences, and then it was used as a message board when Walter wrote his note, and then like Spike kind of ambled over to Toby and she took the note. But then the only other thing that Spike really accomplished was kind of served as a way to introduce Ceres, the other Bloudenbrid that we know of, besides Luna, right? And Ceres says, "Oh, it's an offshoot, or offcut of Luna," and so then there was instantaneous trust kind of built in, and I think that's all that, and that's really all that Spike did in this particular book, and I'm just like, really? Again, like I feel so disappointed because like it was such a, it was kind of made of it, I feel like the book made a big deal of the fact that Spike wanted to go, and then it was just kind of a disappointing reason, right? Like how Spike was utilized was a little bit disappointing. And so I'm really hoping that we do end up coming back to Ceres and coming back to her rose goblins, and that it is actually important that Spike was there. I'm hoping in the later books that this actually does come back, because otherwise it just feels loose, if that makes sense. And then let's talk about Tia and her betrayal, the Kushi betrayal of the Silences. Now, I understand why Tia decided to betray the Silences. She decided that they were not treating her well, that it was more treating the Kushi like pets instead of equals. Okay, totally fine. But like, you're helping the unnamed queen, who has never been anything more than a bigot, and like Rhys is way worse. So if you knew Rhys was going to be on the throne, you definitely shouldn't have supported that. But also, like, the unnamed queen isn't exactly good either. So what were you hoping to gain? And then you end up settling in the unnamed queen's territory anyway. Like, what? Okay. And then it's just like, we know that there was a group of Kushi who were also like part of this rebellion, but we don't know if it was all the Kushi, and we don't know if it's Madden, which I think is kind of an important thing, and we don't know like what happens to them now. Like, do we kick them out of the mist? Do we not trust them? Like, what happens? We definitely caught Tia, and she is going to be punished, but like, what happens to everybody else who was also doing this stuff? How do you ferret the good bad people from the good, and like, what do you do with them? And then like, it just, I had so many questions, and it just really felt like this plot point was there to explain how the Mist was able to overcome the Silences so easily. And that really bothered me, just because this is like, I mean, that is an important thing to consider, but there's so many unexplained parts to this betrayal that it doesn't feel like it was executed very well. And like, I just kind of come to expect better from Seanan McGuire. And so I am hoping, again, we come back to this particular plot point, because otherwise I am going to be annoyed and think that it was just not well done. I do think that meeting Ceres was interesting. I am expecting that she will come back again later. I haven't, again, pure speculation about most of the rest of the stuff that we're going to be talking about. I don't know that we're going to see Ceres again, but I do think that we will, and I am excited to see that. Toby did have the stray thought of, I wonder if we could track down all the Bloudenbrids just by tracking where blind Michael didn't ride. And I'm like, oh, that means you're definitely eventually going to have to track down all the Bloudenbrids, and now that's how you know how to do it. And so I'm excited to see why she has to do that. Pure speculation that this is what's going to happen. But I do think that I'm not wrong. And so I am excited to see how that goes. And then obviously there's going to be fallout from Toby offering the changeling's choice to everybody in Silences and absolutely no other kingdoms. I'm pretty sure we get that debate about that in the next book. But I think that even beyond the next book, it's going to continue to come up that she did offer the changeling's choice to an entire kingdom, and now she needs to do it for everybody. I'm also intrigued by the fact that Toby now has debts of gratitude from like a significant portion of very powerful people. She tracked down Duchess Lorden's kidnapped boys. She literally brought the Lushak back to life. She put Queen Arden on the throne. She put Queen Sawan back on the throne. Like, she has done some major things for some very important people, and I am sure that this is all going to come back near the end game and be incredibly important, and I just kind of can't wait. And I also want to see who else she ends up collecting debts of gratitude from. And then lastly, I did want to mention that I thought it was so interesting. At the end, when Toby was dying, she looked at the unnamed queen and said, "Please just tell me your name. I'm already dying. Like, I'm not going to be able to pass it to anybody. Please just tell me." And the unnamed queen says, "I sold my name so that I could get everything that I ever wanted. And I don't regret that, but I don't have a name to give you." And we kind of blow past it because immediately Reese is torturing Toby again. But I got stuck on that. And I think that's so interesting because who did she sell her name to and why? Why did that person want her name? And so now I'm really hoping that we come back to this question and it gets answered, because I do find that to be incredibly interesting. But that is it, you guys. I am very excited for the next book to have all the fallout from this particular terrible diplomatic mission, and see where it's going to go from here. But if you guys want to continue the discussion, feel free to leave me comments down below. But otherwise, that is all I have. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.